Welcome to the SDG Media Zone. I'm Mark Fischetti, Senior Editor at Scientific American magazine. Today we have with us Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy to the 2021 Food Systems Summit. Among many achievements, Dr. Kalibata is a former Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda. We will be talking about ensuring a sustainable food system worldwide. Dr. Kalibata, welcome. So glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to begin by asking you about food and climate change. A lot of recent attention to improving the food supply chain seems to focus on techniques that create more healthy food and also reduce carbon emissions. Solutions for both issues, food and climate, could be terrific. But are there some also basic solutions to hunger and nutrition that the world deeply needs that may not have much to do with climate? How does the world address both of these priorities?
No, thank you. And we are at a very interesting crossroads when it comes to talking about food and talking about climate change, mostly because we need to address the challenge of nutrition. In addition, of course, to address the challenge of feeding people. We can't do it without worrying about what type of diets people are exposed to and how much that impacts their well-being. But also then we can't stop doing it without thinking about climate change. So this creates an important and interesting dynamic that makes the whole idea of food systems pretty complex and complicated. But in terms of solutions that we need to be looking at, we need to think through what type of solutions we can deploy that will minimize climate change. And some of the things that people are thinking about, can we do agriculture the old way, where rotation used to be important, where putting things back into the system used to be important. And this is very critical because we take stuff from the soil, we take stuff from the air, we are taking from the environment. So any system that provides an opportunity for us to put back and really return what we've taken is extremely important, and we need to be looking at that without going overboard, because some of what we've done in the past, we've put sometimes too much, and that has impacts as well. And that challenges the soil environment, and we need to reduce that. But there are also other ways of looking at the crop mixes of the type of landscape, food landscape, crop landscape that we can put in place. And some of the solutions that are being proposed in the summit are things like agroecology, right? How would agroecology contribute to a functional food system? So I think really the challenge here is, how do we minimize what we take while at the same time think through how we return from what we take from the soil and from basically the landscape of producing food. So that's the challenge that we have to deal with. And I'm not sure that there are simple solutions, quick fixes, but those are some of the things that people are thinking through.
Right. So depleting the soil, or as you said, too many inputs, too much fertilizer where it's not needed, and it strikes me as some of the basic challenges that smallholder farmers, as they're called in developing countries, really have a hard time with. And I think your own family story is sort of a powerful one. It has something to do with that. Your parents managed to make enough income in agriculture to support your education through university. And research shows that empowering smallholder farmers, women in particular, in developing countries is crucial to economic success and therefore educational success, which then comes back to farming success. Could you kind of connect those dots? How important are those three things working together?
I think one of what we need to look at is the kind of farming landscape that makes farming for smallholder farmers less subsistence and more income generating. So yes, they need to produce food to eat, but farmers don't go to farm so that they can produce food to eat. For them, it's a livelihood. It has to be profitable. It has to be business. And some of the basic things that they need to turn into a profitable livelihood is ability to access some of the technologies that now the rest of the world takes for granted, right? Things like improved seed that is not necessarily big biotech. seeds that can deal with some of the basic challenges they are dealing with, diseases. Dealing with diseases of beans can make a difference between 200 kilograms and a ton of beans. Dealing with diseases and pests of maize can make a difference between 1 ton and 5 metric tons, which then of them is sheer profit for you. So the idea of ensuring that really conventional breeding that gives farmers an opportunity to have farming as a business is important. The idea of using fertilizers, now from a technology perspective, we know that there are new ways of using fertilizers, whether it's deep placement, whether it's microdosing,
right,
it's blending. There are new ways of using fertilizers that make it possible for farmers to use them. One, it reduces the cost of investment for them. It's extremely important for them to invest in only what they need. 2, it reduces impact on the environment. 3, it ensures yields. So either way, you're creating opportunities for them in that type of landscape. And then, because you're reducing the cost of doing business, women farmers that usually have limited access to financing are having an opportunity. And those are the things we need to address. Besides the input side to increase productivity, farm productivity, we also need to address the challenge of access to funding and the challenge of markets. One reason why farmers keep going back to business that they were doing before to non-productive systems is because they don't have markets. Farmers know how to feed themselves, but farmers that don't have a market for their produce have no incentive, have no business to get into debt to produce, because it will go to waste. So I think there are a number of things there, but really fixing some of that very basic access to technology part, very basic access to finance, and very basic access to markets would completely transform the farming landscape for smallholder farmers.
I'm glad you brought up markets, because, as you said earlier, it's a business. I mean, this is how individuals, families make their living. So, anyone anywhere is thinking about a business, if they realize, well, I can't really make this work, then why would they do it? It's the things that you just brought up made me think of one other aspect of this. So it's the training of local people. A lot of times I think experts come into a place and try to recommend what should be done, but for local agriculture to succeed in farming and as a business and for markets, it's vital to train local people in food science, farm management, the economics, rather than just sending in an expert from afar. Is that the case? Do you find that a lot of places, and what can you do to help that?
So it's really important. It's great that you have brought up that perspective of training local people. First of all, training in the first place. One of the biggest frustration of agricultural systems is not recognizing that agriculture is a science, right? And to be able to be successful at it, you always have to be using fresh knowledge that is out there, ensuring that knowledge becomes available, but also fresh knowledge as becomes available. So training is a must in agricultural systems for agriculture to be productive. Now, one of the things we are doing now, taking off my food systems hat and talking about what I see from the work I do at AGRA, the institution that I'm president for, we have started using local people in villages. Usually we ask a village to decide who do they think in the village is educated enough and trusted enough to be part of their training. And we call them village-based advisors. And we train these people. We train these people in 2 things. We train them in how to make agriculture work for farmers, but we also train them in the type of businesses that they can do in that ecosystem and really become the place where a farmer goes for knowledge, but also for a few things they need. So basically, they do understand how tree crops work. They do understand how good yields are gotten using improved varieties, and they do have access to those varieties, and they do understand how to use fertilizers better. So with that knowledge, we link them up to farming communities which trust them, in which they are born and live, and where they feel that making mistakes is not something that they want to be associated with, because that's a family and a community you're not going to move away from. We link them to businesses, which businesses they really don't know. The farmers themselves wouldn't know who these businesses are. The person sits between a business environment that can provide the right inputs, but then you have someone who is trusted and understands the business, what you should be doing. So for farmers, it becomes easy to trust village-based advisors because they know them and they know that what they bring to them is something that they would take and use in their own farms. So basically, you've removed the whole idea of risk because people are selling stuff to you. You've removed it because you put in between someone that people trust, someone that understands what they need, and someone you're educating, you're helping understand what's going on and what works in that community. So it's something that is beginning to work very well, and it takes pressure away from governments because governments really can't afford extension. That's something we now know. Right. In Africa, many governments have not been able to afford extension. And many communities where you see agriculture still struggling, it's because most of these communities are not able to access extension. So for us, these village-based advisors have taken the pressure off governments and are providing support and actually linking businesses are linking to them in a good way that works both for these people, but also for the communities they come from.
That's really interesting. I'm really glad you kind of painted that whole picture because basically it's connecting people who can work together in a kind of a network, right? So I wonder, during your tenure as Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda, you moved the country from a food insecure nation to a food secure nation. I'm sure there are many factors, and maybe those connections you're talking about was one of them. But is there perhaps one larger theme or lesson that other countries can learn from Rwanda's success?
One thing that I think is underestimated is the whole place of political will and leadership. Agricultural systems are heavy investment type of systems. You can't move agricultural systems without being prepared to invest in them. In a country like Rwanda in particular, where smallholding is the smallest gets in the world, to be able to move farmers from producing really nothing to producing something that they can use to feed their families and even have surplus that they can take to the market has to recognize the role of the real value of productivity increases. So leadership is very important there because in Rwanda, the government made that decision, but also put resources in the agricultural sector. So I was well supported from a government perspective. And then I brought in what I knew, I had learned from school, and the networks that I had built that would be able to support me. So it's a combination of, you have great leadership that's prepared to invest in people and move them forward. You have the knowledge, because in some cases, the lack of knowledge also can be a nightmare. You have the knowledge and the comfort and the ability to tap into international systems and networks. We have the CGIR for a reason. Tapping into them and using that opportunity is huge. We have universities and connections with universities, like I had gone to the University of Massachusetts, which is a land grant university that had done this for a living. So being able to link my knowledge back to the university and being able to tap into my professor and other people I had worked with also comes in handy. So you have a network of knowledge that can support you move things forward. Those are some of the challenges, but really the bottom line is political will, leadership, followed by investments, and then the capability to deliver, because a lot of countries struggle with the ability to deliver.
That's a really good note to end on. I believe that's all the time we have. Thank you, Dr. Kalibata, for such an interesting discussion and your insights. You know, you've been there yourself for so long. Connecting all these things together is really inspiring. And so thank you for your time, and thank you for all of you listening and joining us on SDG Media Zone.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.